What's up, peoples? Jonathan from Hierarchy here. This video is about how to program more realistic drum MIDI patterns into your DAW, preferably Ableton, but you might be able to apply this to other DAWs with their samplers. So I'm going to start off with sort of some of the more obvious ways to make your drums sound realistic, and then get into some of the more less obvious, more intricate ways to make your drums sound more realistic. All right, so the first thing is sample selection. Obviously, if you can, get a realistic drum plugin like Addictive Drums or BFD3 that are velocity sensitive, triggering, have different variations of the samples within, it's going to sound a lot better. Like this is what it sounds like, me finger drumming some of the Addictive Drums. So obviously, because the samples sound like a real drum kit, that's one easy way. The next thing is your pattern and the way that you play in your pattern. I think, if you play your drum pattern, even on like an electric kit, more like this. If you play your pattern in, then you can kind of skip the next two steps, that I'm going to talk about, velocity and groove, because when you play a pattern in, it's not perfectly quantized, so you don't need to you have a natural groove. You naturally are playing different velocities, so it's gonna sound more realistic if you can play it in. You can play it, on your keyboard like I usually do, or a really nice drum trigger, or even electronic drums. And that makes it really tight too, because the notes will be really shorter. Like when you're hitting, hi-hats with a stick, it makes these really short MIDI notes. And obviously drum rolls is on an electric kit is something it's very hard to emulate on a keyboard, but you can do it if you practice enough. So yeah, play your patterns in live is a good way. So the most obvious way that people talk about, making realistic drum sounds is using velocity. So if we just program in like a basic beat on eighth notes, so on my samplers here that I'm triggering the drums with, I have the velocity turned up to 100, which is important, which is an important thing to do when, if you want to make them sound really realistic. You have a lot more play with this. But I usually like to do this one a little bit lower, this one even lower, this one's kind of the highest, and this one's like either lower or higher. And then I just repeat or copy it. And then make your the double kick a little quieter. So using the velocity obviously is the fastest way. And then I might double this out right now and make these ones even lower. That's that way when we So the next section is the groove, and with the 16ths, we'll really hear the groove kind of activate. And in my template, I always have a bunch of preset grooves that I've set up in my groove pool. Like my friend Dropical, he really likes the New York cut. About 50% on the timing. So that's with it, without it. With it. If I copy it over with this button, you'll see it change and go off the grid. So that's a really simple, using the groove is just a great way to take a basic beat and then make it into something that has some feel. So the next thing is this awesome trick that makes, this is really kind of the secret sauce that I wanted to share. It's basically when you go into the sampler, there's this little MIDI tab, and if you, under the velocity section, you can select pitch and then turn it up a bit. What that means is the higher the velocity, the harder you hit the key, the keypad or the MIDI control, the higher the pitch is going to be on the sound. So like for a hi-hat, which is this is how drums operate. Like the harder you hit a real drum, the higher the pitch is technically. So if I turn it up like a lot, you can really hear it. Yeah, I guess we can just play the pattern and listen. I usually have it in the 2 to 5 range, because you don't always want the pitch going up so much that you're kind of losing the tonality of it. But I do that on my hi-hats. You can do it on your snares too. Snares are great for it. I suppose you could do it on kicks too, but I don't do it that much. But yeah, that's the velocity pitch. That's the velocity pitch trick. And then for the snare, there's also a pitch envelope decay trick. So what you do is you turn on your pitch envelope and you turn the amount to +5 or so, or you turn it down to +5. Like if you had it up here, it'll go from high to low. But if you do it like this, I think it goes low to high. And I usually route like the decay to like a knob so I can kind of mess with it. But anyway, this is kind of emulating like a real hard slap on a snare. So when it's turned down, you can hear it. And I say anywhere from like 45 milliseconds to like in the 300 range somewhere. So that's with it, and then without it, it's just kind of basic. It's like a basic snare. It's just one tone, But then when you it's got some like snap to it. It's got some movement in there with the pitch envelope decay. So that is the pitch envelope decay snare trick, and you're basically just changing, the decay. I don't really mess with the release of the attack. So the next little cool trick is using decay on the hi-hats, using an LFO from Max for Live. Let's see, where's the LFO? I think in Ableton 11, it's just like its own little thing in there. But if you map it to the decay and slow it down, turn the depth down, and then offset it. We don't want the rate slower. Not that slow. Not that much depth. Just gives it that realistic drum feel. I'm like kind of bummed that they don't really have a way to do it like they do with the pitch. Like it'd be cool if you could match it to the decay, but I don't think, I've looked a few times and they don't have the decay in here anywhere. So they do have the LFO thing, so it just gives it that natural sound, like a drummer kind of opening up the pedals. They hit the snare. You can also just automate that, do some cool patterns in the automation lanes, and that's another cool way to really give the hi-hats a realistic flavor. And then just the last little side note, extra tip, if you add sidechain on your hats, it can make your beat sound a lot less robotic. So I have a sidechain here on the hi-hat, and then I'm going to take my pattern and put it into my Ghost sidechain. Take off the hi-hats. That's with it. Without it. Yeah, so it just sounds a little better to me, a little less robotic, kind of taking the hi-hats a little bit, down off the ones in particular, the one beat. So that is all. Hope you got a lot of the tutorial. Make sure to like and subscribe. Check out my website, hierarchy.com. I got a really cool Ableton template that I made that's great if you're a beginning producer and you just want to get started making beats right away and have a lot of sounds at your disposal. 5 gigs worth, and and just be able to create more than have to select every sound right away. So yeah, check it out, hierarchy.com. Thanks for watching. One love. Peace.